is, folks. Welcome to those who've managed to connect thus far. We've had over 200 registrations, and some journals have sent in multiple members from their boards, which I think is a great idea. So we've got quite a long day ahead of us. Firstly, let me welcome the head of ASSAf, Dr. Himla Sudal. Hopefully you will be able to stay with us the whole day. And towards the end of the meeting, at the wrapping up, I'll go through a little bit about the history of the NSEF and the Committee on Scholarly Publishing to show what an extraordinarily unique structure we actually have developed in this country, and the fact that so many scholars are joining us for this meeting, which we try to hold at least once a year, shows a certain success in the original planning intentions of ASSAf to set up a sense of a national scholarly community. These meetings have occurred, for those of you who have not been here previously, once a year. Up until COVID, they were held in physical venues, which I think brought their own elements of collegiality and networking to bear. The video link is convenient because it reduces time of travel, cost, and so on. But of course, we remain atomized behind our specific computers. So these events are designed to bring together all the editors, discuss common problems, plan common futures, and to locate South Africa globally on the international map with regard to research and publication. So the minutes, of course, will be issued, as have the previous minutes. And we like to think of these as planning documents, not just as recordings of meetings, but in fact, which help us then move into the next phase of publishing, which at the moment is rapidly changing thanks to digitization, open science, open access, and of course this year the onset of artificial intelligence, which is changing almost everything that we've previously taken for granted. And so these are issues that we have to really address, and I think discussing them in general meetings is the best way to go, because we will all have different experiences or the same experiences, but we can all contribute to answering the questions that are now being asked about all of these threats and opportunities. So let me then move on to the business of the day, and that is the confirmation of the agenda. Does anybody wish to add any points, or can we proceed as recorded on the document? I hear silence. I assume that that is compliance or agreement, in which case we can move to the circulated document. It's 72 pages long. It's partly issued in the format of a proceedings. I'm not going to go through every page because that would take another hour. So let me just ask if there's any points that anybody wants to raise from a reading of the proceedings stroke minutes. There is one listed, and that's the report back on issues of editors. Are there any other points anybody would like to make? Good, I guess silence is golden. That means we can move on then. So the next point is then the report back on the statement on issues and struggles faced by editors of journals in South Africa. This has been a long-going process, and the draft statement did get submitted to the council, and the council had certain questions which they wanted us to reconsider. So Philip de Jager, as the chair of that particular subcommittee, Can you please take us through that and what we're going to be doing next?
Morning, Kian, and morning to everyone. My name is Philip, and I'm a member of the Committee on Scholarly Publishing. My thinking was, since on the program, I've got 10 minutes to do this talk, and now we're ahead of time. My thinking was just to take everyone through what is the history behind this statement, and then I'll tell you where we are at and what the next steps are. So I'm just going to be looking down every now and again at my notes, but in November 2021, we had a similar National Scholarly Editors Forum like this one. And something that came through in the chat and also in the questions and comments was that editors felt that they needed support. And specifically, I made my summary of the minutes afterwards. They needed support in a few levels. Primarily, they needed support in terms of acknowledgement from the university system of the work that they do and the contribution that they make to academic life. Then there was an issue around financial resourcing of journals and editors and reviewers. There was an issue that was often mentioned, difficulty in terms of finding reviewers. And also there was discussion around what is the exact purpose of South African academic journals. Just to say, in terms of process, these issues that are highlighted, that came from an analysis of the minutes of the meeting that I did afterward. Then our Committee on Scholarly Publishing, we formed a subcommittee. On there, it was myself, Professor Leslie Swartz, Professor Robin Crew, and we came up with a few iterations of a statement. A statement, I think the aim was to really lift up the editorial process and the contribution made by editors and reviewers of journals, and specifically South African journals, to academic life and academia in general in South Africa. This statement from the subcommittee then went through a few iterations of sharing it with the broader Committee on Scholarly Publishing committee, and we get feedback and we redraft, get feedback. Then there was an official round where the statement went to external reviewers, and we received the feedback from the reviewers. A specific point that I want to highlight here that was included in the feedback is that the reviewers said some of these issues that you're raising, these are not new issues. These are issues that ASSAf has commented on before, and we need you to also incorporate, previous ASSAf statements and comments on these issues, which we then did. Eventually, our statement then ended up with the ASSAf board, and the board decided the statement is not ready yet. My summary in my mind, just thinking back about the feedback that we received, is that the board felt that we were being too prescriptive to South African universities, and that ASSAf it's not their place to say to the universities how they should run their business. I think it could also be the language that we used in the statement. Perhaps we can just, by tweaking the language, be a little bit less prescriptive and more suggestive. I was warned before the time by Professor Johan Maton on the committee that by a specific point that was put into the statement after the reviewer's comment. I mean, one of the reviewers, the comment was that they think that we can actually do a bit more. So a point that I may put in there that I think might have been seen as a little bit too prescriptive rather than suggestive was to move the whole performance evaluation process of being an editor, being a reviewer. Currently in most universities, it sits under the social responsibility category. And the suggestion was to move it to the research category. I mean, I think I was warned about that being a little bit too prescriptive, and it seems to have come back to be an issue. What are the next steps? We are going to form a subcommittee, continue as a subcommittee, and process the comments that we got from the ASSAf board, and we will redraft the statement. And I think the idea there is then to resubmit it to the board. So hopefully after this round, it'll be more successful. Thank you, Kian.
Thank you, Philip. Yeah, this has been quite a long process, and I think it's an important one, because my guess is that the majority of editors working in the public university sector find that the work that editors do is not sufficiently acknowledged, let alone recognized within their daily work schedule, and that editing, peer reviewing, indeed even external examining is something that we are expected to do outside of working hours. And yet editing is, and peer reviewing is, the engine of the academic enterprise. Of it, whether or not it's reviewing publications or reviewing ratings applications. Much of our work is taken in this regard, and the somewhat perverse distorting effects of the DHET subsidy system has resulted too often in universities considering publication in terms of a balance sheet which pays the bills, but not in terms of the symbolic production and the time taken to shape disciplines and paradigms, which is what editors do. We're not just postmasters shuffling submissions around and liaising with reviewers. We're in fact trying to shape entire disciplines. And so the role of the editor, as far as our committee is concerned, needs to be much more prominently understood by universities. It needs to become part, explicitly so, of performance management contracts, and time needs to be allocated to reviewers and editors to do their jobs on behalf of the country as a whole, not just in terms of their specific responsibilities to universities. So that's the kind of philosophical background to this. And I think that these feelings of this committee and the issues that it's discussed, as has ASSAf over a long period of time, are reflected globally. Editors across the world, I think, are beginning to feel that their work is not being fully supported or recognized. And the result is that everybody's asked to publish, but who's going to actually manage the process of getting published? So there's a key component in the cog. There's a key cog that is missing from the recognition and reward systems. So that's my two bits. Does anybody else want to perhaps offer any comments? Perhaps other members of the committee or members more generally? We'd really like to hear your experiences, if not in this meeting, certainly in subsequent correspondence.
Kian, so we've got a hand up from Susan.
Good. Okay, I didn't see that. Yes, Susan.
So thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. So nice to see old names and pleased to meet all the new names. My name is Susan Veldsman. I'm the Director of the Scholarly Publishing Program at the Academy of Science of South Africa. And then once again, just a very big thank you to our Executive Officer for joining us this morning in this very important meeting. I hope this will be enjoyable to all. Just to add to the points that Philip has raised, just want to say, yes, it has been a very long process and in some instances almost painful. But Philip, just to give you some encouragement in terms of your road ahead, I completely agree with you. We have already, from the Secretariat's point of view, have started to look at the language, because that was one criticism from the Council, that maybe it's not in the language of a statement. So Maputi and I have really given it a hard go to just try and taper it down. So it will be very nice to submit that to you and your committee. And I absolutely agree, is that we just get a group together, maybe with some other editors and researchers, and just massage this particular statement into a statement that will be acceptable to all. So thank you very much for all your effort in this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Susan. Are there any other points? Anybody? We do have a bit of time. Okay, my internet connection, I'm now told, is unstable. So if I disappear, Susan, please do step in for me. There have been no comments from the floor. One more chance. Shall we? Okay, let me ask a question of the delegates. Are these issues, as we have described them, not, are they experienced also by yourselves as editors in your own particular contexts? Would anybody like to respond to that? Okay, there have been no comment as yet. Maybe people will warm up during the course of the day. Then let's then move on to the section that is scheduled for 9:30, but that gives us a little bit of extra time then to deal with these issues. And back to then Susan Felsman, who will take us through a number of points from open science statement through to ASSAf open science policy at the end of that particular section. Over to you, Susan.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let me just start then with the first point, and that is then the CLO Open Science Statement. Just want to give a little bit of background why all these items, and it was quite significant as last year CLO Network celebrated its 25 years of existence as a network. In this network, there are 14 countries participating, of which South Africa is, of course, one through our CLO South Africa platform that we host and that we drive from our point of view. So every 5 years, the CLO network has a huge conference, normally in Brazil, and so it was again last year, celebrating the CLO's 25 years. And then as a forerunner to this conference, there were a couple of things that they needed us to endorse, of which one was a CLO Open Science Statement. It was right just before we actually left for Brazil. We sought permission then from our Executive Council to see if we can endorse the Open Science Statement. It was approved, and we had permission then to go ahead and to add the name of South Africa then to that statement. The statement was circulated to you before the meeting, and I hope you have had time to have a look at it. It is a statement that just broadly indicates that the network, and then specifically South Africa, supports and will advance open science in their different countries. Can I just move on? Maybe after every third or fourth point, I will just pause, Kian, maybe just for some questions or some comments. Otherwise, I really feel like a sausage machine just running through all the points. So please guide me. Is that fine with you?
I'd like to get delegate participation in from the start, as we've been trying. So folks, do feel that you can put your hands up and ask questions, as Susan has indicated after her address of particular sections within the agenda. Go
thank
ahead.
You very much.
Okay. Since there's further silence, I think you can go ahead for the next point.
Thank you very much. Yes, and this is a very open meeting. This is not a closed software that we're using, so feel free to raise your hands and to interject. Please see it as being very informal, etc. So thank you very much. So the next on the agenda point is then the guidelines for the use of artificial intelligence in the editorial process. That was also one of the documents that they wanted to us endorse, but we said no, we would like to get further input from our editors in South Africa. So we brought it back home, and my colleague Louise van Heerden, who is the manager of the CLO South Africa collection, proceeded and circulated it then to the National Scholarly Editors Forum group for comments and input. So thank you very much. We have received quite a number of comments, which we will consider and might incorporate in the guidelines. It was very interesting actually to go through the comments, because they really vary from statements that we should not use AI to statements very positively and incorporating it then in the guidelines of the particular journals. Just for your information, the South African Journal of Science has just launched their new guidelines of using AI in writing and submitting manuscripts to SAJS. So that would be an interesting reference point maybe for yourselves to have a look at in your guidelines then to authors. I must add that we can see that slowly but surely other journals are also adopting a artificial intelligence guidelines into their editorial policies. So please have a look at that, because we can see that these guidelines will form quite a core part also of our code of best practice when reviewing the code of best practice, which I will elaborate on it just a little bit later in one of the other points. So that's about the guidelines for the use of AI in the editorial process. Okay, I will proceed. I'm not seeing any hands from your side, so please just stop me if there's any hands. Chair, I'm not sure on your side. I cannot see any comments at this moment.
No, I don't think there's any comments, and I don't see any hands, so do proceed.
Thank you. So the third point is then the performance evaluation and inclusion criteria. So during the CELA 25 celebrations, every 5 years, new objectives and outcomes are being set by the network that journals within the network have to comply with. We prepared also a sort of assessment as to where are the journals within the CELA South Africa collection in terms of adhering to this criteria. And I think we're very happy to report for the previous 5 years criteria, I think about 85% of our journals have been complying to the full amount of the actual criteria. So it is very hard work from the team to get all the journals up to a very particular standard and adhering to the criteria. But what we find now is there's a new set of criteria. Every 5 years, the bar is being lifted, and these criteria sort of aligns with international standards as well. So it's nothing extraordinary in the sense that we do not agree with the CELA network. It certainly sort of ties up and aligns then with international best practices in terms of these journals being hosted on the CELA network. This performance evaluation and inclusion criteria, we can again see that we will have to bring all these points home. And I will speak about the publications quality framework, which is driven by the CREST, Professor Johan Maton and his team, in contact with the Department of Higher Education Training, but we will spend some time on that point just a little bit later. But we'll have to bring this criteria in line with the PQF, or rather, let me rather say and state that we will have to bring the PQF, the Publications Quality Framework, in line with the criteria as set out by the network for CELA South Africa, well, CELA network collections as such, and they're very important. Just want to mention CELA South Africa is 15 years old this year. And so this collection has matured, and with any maturity and young children getting older and getting into adulthood, you can imagine there are some problems starting to arise because of this sort of this longevity of the history of the journals on the platform. So we certainly will have to have a critical look at journals on the platform. Where are they? Where are they going? Are they performing? If not, why not? And what then will we do if they not perform? So this is a very critical sort of area as well of the the CLO advisory board that has been constituted or reconstituted last year, because we had COVID in between, and that really sort of derailed the functions of this group to advise this CLO team on the CLO South Africa collection. Well, at the moment, to have your journal listed onto the CLO South Africa platform, of course, first of all, it has to be open accessible. But secondly, there were two very pertinent sort of criteria to allow these journals onto the platform. One of them is that they have to be DHET accredited. And secondly, it had to receive a positive peer review evaluation from an ASSAf peer review panel. So the ASSAf peer review process has come to an end. All 322 journals have been evaluated. So now, under the publications quality framework, a new process will start, which we hope is much shorter. It will have to be, because the project is not going on forever, and we'll have to see how do we shorten this process, but be impactful and deliver with value and impact, of course, into the system as such. So that still stands for the moment until we have aligned the publications quality framework work and that of ASSAf as such. Of course, there are compulsory criteria in allowing the journals to participate in this network. It's nothing new, and it is also stated in our code of best practice that journals should actually adhere to these ones. And I'll just quickly give you a flavor of what are the type of things that is sort of compulsory criteria for the CLO South Africa collections. It is about affiliations, where the full affiliations detail will have to be expressed, like the unit, the department, school, the author works in, the city, the country. All articles must include an English title, an abstract, some keywords. We still find that some journals don't have keywords, and that is considered as being best practice. All the corrections, errata, retractions, withdrawals, appeal, and all those policies have to be online, and the journals have to state very clearly what is their position on these matters. We do have a session that will address that as well today. And then in line to move to the open science, of course, journals need to include a policy stating, and this is quite new, of course, is whether they accept preprints, and if they do, under which conditions, and what are the rules around that. And then also whether the journals are starting to consider open peer review, or do they practice open peer review? And if they do, how do they do that? Is it full open peer review? Is it partially? But it needs to be stated in the policy. So that will be the next compulsory requirement for CLO South Africa network journals. So the encouraged criteria, and this is now where we get into the field also, is the use of AI tools. Journals will have to do a position statement on how do they feel and what will they allow and what will they not allow. Of course, this places huge amount of pressure on the tools to be used to detect the use of AI, and of course, the structure of a manuscript indicating whether it used AI tools or not. So this becomes very important. What is also quite interesting, and this is also internationally recognized as starting to be a best practice, is to have an inclusive language policy. South African Journal of Science has one. You can go and have a look at this for interest. As also Clean Air, also have a statement on inclusiveness and equity. So there's a whole notion, and it's also just to be transparent and open in terms of the processes, editorial processes as such. There's also a huge amount of pressure on journals to also start publishing more articles per year. So already said the CLO network is putting down the criteria to say that if you publish less than 20 articles per year, that you should rather consider and revert to continuous publication. In other words, is that you publish your articles as they are approved by your editorial team and peer reviewers, etc., and the editors, that you publish them as they become publish ready. So this is quite something to note. And also, if there's data then connected to a particular manuscript or article, is that data set is also included in the publishing of the article. So that's also important to note. And I know that some journals in our forum is already starting to include the data sets, etc., and to indicate and the linkages and whether it's and even if they publish on the sort of title page of each article, they start indicating whether there are data sets included or not. Very important, and this will come out also in when I share the results of the Diamond Open Access Journal study that we are involved in, and that is that journals do not have editorial development plan, not for the editors or associate editors, and that's starting to get very problematic. But also that they don't have a sustainability plan for their journals. So this is now moving into the management of the journals as such, to ensure sort of the longevity and the sustainability of a journals as such. So this will be quite an interesting point for discussion, I think, in going forward. And of course, we have also spoken about social media presence in previous meetings, that it is important also to open up some social media accounts for marketing and for visibility of a journal. So those are the sort of criteria that's being considered by the team, and which we have regular discussions with the different editors of the different journals within the CLA South Africa collection. But as I indicated before, is our huge problem at the moment. And I just saw that, Nkosi, you have raised your hand. I'm just going to brief there, and you're welcome to interject if you would like to ask a question. Please proceed. Dr. Madondu?
Yes, hi. Hi, everyone. Yes, good morning. Nice to see you again. Just a point of interest, from me, based on some of, well, I attended Cielo Brazil 25, by the way. So one of the points that were raised in relation to open access, and publishing through that channel was the overhaul of outdated publishing and research assessment practices, so in other words, moving forward, so I think it ties closely with open peer review as well, in that sense, so I just maybe as of interest, because it seems that is the direction we might be moving towards. How far are we considering, some of those issues, in terms of these outdated, closed, assessment practices? I hope I'm clear.
Yes, thank you, Nkosi, and colleagues. Dr. Madondu accompanied us to the CLA 25 celebrations in Brazil, and he spoke about the SAJS inclusive language policy at the conference, and it really solicited quite a bit of attention and discussion. And I think if we talk about transformation, I think South Africa as a whole, as a system, has a very different definition of transformation than any other international country has. So, but it solicited a lot of interest, and I think it really opened up the eyes how to think about transformation and what it should actually include. So thank you again, Dr. Madondu, for joining us there. But thank you
you.
also very much for your question. And you are right. We are moving into the direction of open science. And if I may answer already now, and that is to say, if we look at open science, yes, of course, alternative performance evaluation systems or alternative metrics, etc., is high on the agenda of open science. And I think the time is right, is that we now move into that space, even as a scholarly publishing program, that we start sort of at least just create a platform where we can discuss that and sensitize sort of the powers to be out there, that we should start more seriously to talk about this and see how it happens. Of course, if you move into an open science field and you start promoting openness, etc., you have to ensure that your evaluation system starts incentivizing, and not monetary incentivizing, but have checks and balances in its evaluation systems for authors to participate in these open science activities, open access, open data activities, so that they get recognition for the work and the participation that they actually do in that field. So my very quick answer is no. South Africa is nowhere near that. Have we started some discussions? Yes, we have, but certainly not in the sense that you are alluding to, that it's a good debate and that debate is prominent in the system as such. So definitely not. But we certainly will take your challenge on board, and we will also start looking to get some conversations and debate around this very particular issue. So thank you very much for raising. And you're right. You know, during that conference, that was core and that was imminent, and that was the main theme actually of the conference. Yes. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Shall I move on?
Yeah, I think move on to your next point. Just tell us where we are, because I think the issues are beginning to merge, as they should, but we need to separate them for the purposes of recording.
And yes, indeed. So I'm still under performance evaluation and inclusion criteria. I'm still busy highlighting sort of the issues we have to deal with on the platform, and ensuring that our journal stays of quality, and that they have impact and value into the system as such. So the other point that we're really grappling with, and I did allude to this particular point, and that is the non-performing of journals. So we have a couple of journals which are not performing on the platform. We are very aware that international indexes like DOAJ or Web of Science are starting to scrap them, if I can put it that way, from their indexes because they're not performing. So as the advisory board has decided that we will enter into some discussions with them, and consideration will be actually being given not to index them any further. The SELA South Africa is meant for quality, open, full text, open access journals, of course, which is vibrant and live in the system, and that non-performance is viewed in a very serious matter internationally, because it does not contribute then to sort of the trustworthiness and the value and input of the impact of the actual collection. So we still have to have some discussions around that, but I think in principle a decision has been made by the advisory board, is that some very strict measurements will be taken against these journals for non-performance, etc. And of course, the last point that I just want to raise, and this is a very contentious one, and we've had many occasions within the National Scholarly Editors Forum where we discussed this, and of course it is the percentage affiliation that should be represented of authors in a particular journal and institutions, etc. It's the 75-25 principle, which is sort of very well embedded into the research output policy. and it's causing quite a lot of headaches in terms of how does one interpret the 75-25% rule. SALA South Africa had a bit of a leeway or a leverage or a gap in the sense that it is an accredited index, and that the Department of Higher Education and Training feels that if you're part of the accredited index, then the rules of that index will then prevail and not the rules of the DHE research output policy. I hope it doesn't sound whether I'm discarding the rules. We're not. We are just saying that in terms of the 25-75 rule, there is a little bit more relaxation, etc. Although we strongly recommend still that there would be a spread of authors when publishing in a particular issue of a particular year. We have a criteria of about 35% rather. So it is just about diversity of authors and institutions of articles being published in a particular year. But this is very contentious and it solicits a lot of discussions, etc. And I know within the publications quality framework that this will be a very big point of debate. So what will be that broad criteria that we will apply then for journals to adhere to, and also to fulfill the research output policy requirement? So I can assure you we will certainly hope that we come back with a more nuanced interpretation of this particular rule. It does seem that up to now that the SALA South Africa journals had complied with this particular rule, and we were in a safe space in terms of how we applied it. But some more discussions on that. Kian, I'm just going to stop there for a moment before I proceed to the next point. Right. So any more questions?
Yes, I'd just like to make some historical points. Yep. The 75%, 25% division initially started as a 50-50 division. A directive from DHET, wasn't an ASSAf criterion at that point. And the reason for that was because of the fact that some journals were over-publishing from within their host institutions. And this was seen to place particular pressure on the incentive subsidies being paid over, and that there was an asymmetrical distribution of subsidy across the country. So it was an attempt to regulate how over-publishing by authors from individual institutions in their house journals. And those journals, of course, were either on the DHET accredited list or had been included in the international indexes. But if we go earlier than that, the original philosophy articulated by the architect of the system was that South African journals should, as they develop and as they stabilize and as they increase their local and global exposure, would eventually migrate onto the big indexes like Web of Science, Procast, Scopus, etc. So those journals that are indexed on those indexes are considered international, which seems to be a similar kind of situation with Scilo journals. They're given more leeway to publish in terms of 50-50 rather than perhaps 75-25, although there's no actual division in the internationally identified journals. The problem that editors face, however, for those who have to stick with the 75-25% distribution, is that very large universities with multiple campuses, with multiple departments, similar departments on different campuses, may be working in a large collaborative project. and that project now wants to publish in a journal. And so that's where the difficulty arises, because quite legitimate outputs considered for a special issue guest edited within the university are now told they have to fracture and spread their outputs across a range of journals, which then has an effect in terms of coherence and uniformity and so on. So these are the issues that have to be balanced when one is actually editing. But I think the other point was, we had a query last year from a member who I think is with us, Clinton, Geography Journal, about, you know, fractions of percentages in terms of 25%, 50%, which means that editors have now got to become statisticians in order to work out the fractions and whether those in fact really matter. So perhaps you could just address that last point about, you know, does the fraction of a percent in the division between 25% really matter, and how does DHET actually calculate these things? Over to you.
Thank you, Kian. Yes, no, that is the thing, and that is the debate. You know, is it fractions? Is it, how should we actually how should we measure that? And there's different interpretations, but it does seem that the one that seems to work is to look at and I wonder, Louise, do you have a much quicker answer to a much easier way to answer this? Because I know that the DHET measures it very differently, and you work with it every day. I think they work. Yes, it's a whole thing about co-authorship, and more especially between institutions. And then, of course, as we understand it, is that the articles co-authored by authors from different organizations, they are not included in the 25% calculation. So it is then the main author that across the articles within the issue, that should add up to the 75% role. But now again, there is questions about, is it per issue or is it per annum? We tend to interpret it per annum, because it gives you a far better chance to spread your authorship, etc., amongst institutions. Louise, I see you've unmuted. Would you just like to chip in here?
We'll be together again. Yes, I am putting the link to how Cielo interprets it in the chat box. Just briefly to say that with Cielo, the 35% is just a guideline, but it's still a responsibility of the editor to make sure that a good distribution, both geographically and otherwise, is represented in the journal. I also want to add, with regards to the percentages, Pierre de Villiers, in a webinar we held last year about the interpretation of the DHET policy, and I will place that link in the chat as well, of his slides. He indicated in his consultation with DHET that as soon as a journal has has multiple authors, more specifically from various organizations, that is not is not included in the 25%. 75% rule, because the purpose behind the policy is that they want to get people to cooperate, to work together, to not be insular. So as I said, Pierre de Villiers put it from ASSAf put it very well, and I will share the link to the slides in the chat. It's quite difficult to actually explain it, because it's quite complex, and I hope that the explanation I'll provide in the chat will be sufficient, but you're very welcome to follow up with me. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Louise. So as you can hear, you know, once the debate starts, it just continues. So we hope to make this debate less and to make the requirement more clear. I really think the sector needs that, because we do understand the principle, like Louise have explained, that you have to be that it must not become an in-house journal, but that it must be open and it must encompass other authors from other institutions. So there must be a good spread, and that's also recognized as good and best practices internationally. So we've also did an analysis between the different accredited indexes to see what they say. So nobody, of course, has a percentage, but all of the indexes says that you have to have a spread and a good distribution of authors and geographical areas within your spread of articles being published. So it is a recognized international practice. Right. Shall I proceed? I think so.
Yes, please.
Thank you. So currently, I just want to say a few words then on the CLO South Africa Advisory Committee. When I started, I indicated that this committee was not very functional, and it was because of the because of COVID, and also for the collection to stabilize and to get to a particular point where we can understand what are the challenges of this collection. So we have reinstated the advisory committee. The names of the committee members was circulated to you. And also it has been approved by our ASSAf council. So we met on the 7th of March, 2024, and of course it was chaired by Professor Gian Tomaselli and Professor Egil Glediel, who is then the co-chair of the Committee of Scholarly Publications, etc. So this advisory committee will become very important in going forward to align, as I said, all the different the work between the PQF as well as the work that ASSAf does, and then to align these two. It is very important that they do function in tandem with each other. Okay, I'm still not seeing hands, so I'm proceeding. I want to talk about the future of CLO South Africa. And I want to sort of separate them in two parts, and that's really the future of CLO South Africa, and then the strategic plan, which was suggested during our advisory committee meeting, that we have to think very strategically about what has to happen within CLO South Africa. But first of all, let me just talk about the future of CLO South Africa. CLO South Africa is being funded by the Department of Science and Innovation through our treasury budget that comes to ASSAf, of which a part is then allocated to the scholarly publishing in its entirety. And out of that particular budget, we fund and we support CLO South Africa. Strategically, we have decided that we should get far to ensure the sustainability of CLO South Africa, and we should also push and we should advocate for further and for more in-depth endorsement and support from the Department of Science and Innovation. I think collectively we have reached the point where CLO South Africa is being recognized as a national asset. And being a national asset, we feel very strongly that it has to be supported and recognized in a way through the DSI and the DHET as a national asset. And that fills a very particular position in the national system innovation and of scholarly publishing and in open science in South Africa. In all the documentation, in the framework, the open science framework, which the department has issued, that's still under consideration by Parliament, it is stated, CLO South Africa is particularly stated as being a critical part in taking open science forward. So strategically, and on a very high level between our executive officer and the DG of the Department of Science and Innovation and the Department of Higher Education and Training, some high-level discussions are taking place to ensure that we sustain and that we get the necessary funding to support ASSAf South Africa in going forward for many years to come to fill this very particular role. Just want to stop there, and I hope I'm not putting my executive officer in a spot, but I'm not sure, Himla, if you just want to say something or whether you would, if this is sufficient enough.
Good morning, colleagues. Very nice to be part of this interesting discussion. Yes, Susan has outlined the plan. For several years now, we are trying to source funding for the sustainability of the CLO platform. And we are still in discussion as to how we could go about doing that. But for now, we are still funding it out of our seed funding, which means that it does take away some of the funds that ASSAf could be using for other ASSAf pertinent functions. But that is still on the table for discussion, as Susan has indicated. We had hoped that there would have been some funds secured from another program, but unfortunately, that has not come to fruition. But we will continue to try to source funding to maintain the functionality of CIELO and perform that service for the good, for public good, as Susan has outlined. Thank you very much, Susan.
Thank you, Himla. Right. I'm going to move on to the second part under the future of ASSAf South Africa, and that is the strategic plan. In my discussions with our EO, in one of our discussions and speaking about the scholarly publishing program, I think we have reached the point that we have to repackage what we are doing in the scholarly publishing program. So I want to draw it actually wider than just ASSAf South Africa in terms of a strategic plan. But I would really like to call upon our CSPI-SA, which is our standing committee or advisory committee to our scholarly publishing program, but also to the National Scholarly Editors Forum, that we, well, in the next couple of months, is that we rethink and we repackage scholarly publishing as such. We're doing a huge amount of work. And you will see that when Kian concludes today's proceedings. And I'm not always sure that it that it gets the attention and that government officials or that researchers or institutions actually realizes the very important and crucial role that the scholarly publishing program is playing in this whole system of scholarly publishing in South Africa. So that includes all the role players like CREST, like the DHET. I feel that ASSAf is the glue that bring everything together. We're very neutral and we broker the interests of all the parties together in one melting pot. And that directs and shifts our scholarly publishing, I think, in the right direction. So I think we will send out perhaps an email to members of this forum to ask who will be interested to assist us to come up with our next strategic plan for the next 5 years. The time is opportune. We've come to the end of our 5-year plan, actually in the whole of the government. So government departments are expected now to submit their new 5-year plans starting from 2025. And I think the time is really opportune is that we rethink is how do we position and how do we, what is the lens that we apply when we apply our, and we rethink our strategic direction for the next 5 years. I think our consensus studies have served us well. They have really set the path for us, but I think it's time just to pause and to think about the way ahead. So that is what I just wanted to bring to the attention to this forum meeting, and I think we're at a very crucial time in the history of the scholarly publishing program. Not sure if there's any comments. I cannot see any hands. Okay, then I'll proceed.
Okay, take a deep breath.
I will.
Proceed.
Thank you. I'll move on now to the Cielo South Africa 15-year celebration. I'm quite sure you saw in the introductory video is that we are showcasing actually 3 celebrations that we're having this year. It is Cielo 15 years. That's when I started to work for ASSAf. Now to roll out the recommendations of the first consensus study of ASSAf. And as said, we are almost at the end of that rollout, but we have to apply new lenses to see how we can revive some of the issues there. So it's Cielo 15 years. We also have our South African Journal Science, which is celebrating its 120 years. And then our Quest magazine celebrating its 20 years of existence. So it's quite a celebratory year for us. And you can imagine in terms of our budgets, etc., we have to prioritize and we have to look at what is it that we'll be doing across these 3 publications / platforms to give the necessary accreditation and accolades to what those 3 platforms / publications have achieved over these years. For South African Journal of Science being the oldest, and the more geriatric amongst all the publications, we decided to focus quite a lot. And Leslie and Linda in the team will have actually a huge program to celebrate the 120 years, of course, also giving some featuring articles into the SIJS depicting the whole history. It has a very interesting history, SIJS. It has changed hands many, many times. It has changed organizations many, many times. And sometimes one is actually surprised that it's still alive and very well. So we decided to spend quite a bit of our budget on the SIJS. And then, of course, our Quiz magazine, which really, as the dawn of the new democracy started to be rolled out. So a few years down the line, then the Quest magazine started, also in line with the Department of Science and Innovation, at the time, the new focus in terms of citizen science and also promoting STEM within schools and within the community as such. And then Quest started, so we will have also a couple of pages in the Quest magazine to celebrate that publication. And then Cielo, which is then the youngest of the 3, there will be some articles on our platform, and we will also publish, we hope that our SIJS editorial team will allow us to publish a commentary on Cielo South Africa, just to bring all these celebrations nicely together. So that's just really for your information. And if you have any pieces of historical value of any of these 3 publications / platform, we welcome them, especially your experience with any of these publications. Welcome to drop us some personal anecdotes of your experience, your opinions, your comments, or even criticism we will tackle. So I hope that's interesting for you. Right, so now this is the time, Chair, that I have to take a very deep breath. If I may move on. I'm still not seeing any hands. Can I just motivate you to put your questions into the Q&A boxes? I can see that in the chat boxes there have been a couple of questions. Please just transfer them to the Q&A. I must say, speaking here and just seeing all these questions popping up here on my right-hand side is quite nerve-wracking. So just help us to put them in one place. Eagle, I saw that you have raised your hand. You're welcome to proceed. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. I have 2 points really to make. One about SAIELO and one about SPP, just in general. The first one is, I think in terms of SAIELO, it's good not to underestimate the respect for SAIELO that South Africa gains, and in particular its usefulness to authors who are publishing under the DHET incentive scheme or not. From looking from outside, the fact that South Africa is very active in an Open Science South-South alliance helps South Africa as a scientific community. The second one is about SPP and its strategy going forward. I believe that it's an extremely important and crucial role. It's not just glue, it stands for integrity in the scientific community in a very real sense, in the scientific community of practice, in a time when we are going through some dangerous waters. It is one of the great services to society that ASSAf is responsible for and hosts. So I think that although it operates largely behind the scenes, the results are apparent in the discussions in the scientific community of practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Eagle, for highlighting those very important points. Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to comment about the strategic plan itself, about the future of SAIELO? Any concerns you would like to raise?
Well, if I may come in at this point, Susan, yes, I think you've raised an important point that stability, investment, and continuity are going to be key to the strategic planning that we'll now be undertaking, and that we should not take these kinds of facilities and resources for granted. Budgets change, governments have different priorities, economies grow and contract, and we have to try to come up with a framework that will pilot SCIELO all the way through the threats, but also take advantage of the opportunities. And I think that Eagle has put it very well, that the symbolic value is integrity. ASSAf is the glue that holds it all together. SCIELO is the window to the world. And we have to make sure that SCIELO is, in fact, stabilized and has a long-term plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, so now we're moving to serious matter, if I can put it that way, and that is the publications quality framework project. So again, the documentation has been sent to you, and I hope you've had time to actually go through them. So this is actually quite a long history. And this particular project will be funded from the DHET, Department of Higher Education and Training, and it's funded under the University Capacity Development Program. So at the end of January, at the end of 2022, December 2022, it became apparent that the UCDP has some funding left, unspent monies in their program, and they chose this particular project, the Publications Quality Framework Program, as a project to fund and to roll it out. So in January 2023, all the contracts were signed, and Crest then was appointed as the principal investigator in this particularly in this program, and to take this whole program forward. Crest did submit a work plan and some work packages under this program and for this project to be clear as to what can be expected to happen in this project, and then how it will be rolled out over a 3-year period. So it's not a very long project. It will have to work under very pressurized sort of circumstances. I think that what is really sort of adding a little bit to the concern of this project is that Professor Maton has experienced some health issues, so there are some delays in this project. We were also granted permission then by our executive officer that we can continue in participating in this program. Of course, much of the work is sort of taking over from the large peer review panels that ASSAf did conduct over the 13, 14 odd years, but with the difference that we are actually getting funding for this particular work that we'll be doing. We are not allowed to retrieve any staff funding from the project funding, so we will have to incorporate it into our current structures of the scholarly publishing program. But it will also mean that we will look into your eyes to assist us when we constitute some panels, to assist, to think, and to roll this project out. So as the name of this project says, it is a publication quality framework. So I really think, in short, I really would just want to say that I think that the pressure is on. And the pressure is on editors and journals to comply with whatever criteria is out there. That includes the CLA South Africa criteria, the Code of Best Practice. I can already see that there will be many panel meetings where journals will be evaluated again, and that would really then be a crossroad for certain journals, particularly in the system. My general feeling of the system is that when we issued our first consensus study, there were very particular problems of journals, and that through that consensus study, we tried to address most of them. Then we had the second consensus study, taking stock of what happened over a 10-year period. We could see some movement of journals really trying to better the quality and the output of the different journals. But whether it was sufficient enough, I think in some journals' cases, not really. So we attempted again after our second consensus study on scholarly publishing in South Africa to drive the quality of the journals as such. If you ask me now, where are we now? I would say, well, there's definitely been some movement in the right direction, very positive. We have a core of journals which are really exceeding themselves and is really high performers, and of which things are really going well for them. But there are still a layer which we are very concerned about, etc. That on the one hand side, but on the other hand, we are still finding, despite in our second consensus study where we raised awareness and concern about predatory publishing and unethical publishing practices, that is still ongoing and growing. We are looking at sort of the work that, although that Professor Maton is having some health issues and there's a little bit of slowness, he has a huge team working in the background. So we can already see some preliminary results coming to the fore, which is most alarming, because we can still see that this unethical publishing practices in the system is thriving and it's growing. So that is of huge concern. So I think the publications quality framework came into being at a time where government specifically and the system as a whole has recognized and is looking at this practices and saying that we need a system. As we are well aware, the research output policy brought two things to the fore, or the aims were actually two things, and the one is to reward productivity and research output, which it succeeded magnificently so. But on the other hand, it also said that we must produce quality research output, and the quality is the one being compromised. So government recognized that the quality of research output is dwindling, and that something has to be done to actually look at the system as a whole and try and up the quality and the research and the integrity of the journals and the research output being within conferences or within books, etc. So there's a whole management structure that has been put together. As mentioned, Professor Johan Maton is then the project leader. And the DHET also required that Historical Disadvantage Institute be part of this particular process. And the Cape Peninsula University of Technology was chosen, and Professor Elisha Chiware, director of the library of CPUT, is then the other main member of this management structure. On this management structure, there's also representatives from the Department of Education Training, ASSAf, SARIMA, National Research Foundation, and of course, ASSAf. Alongside this management structure, there's also a consultative stakeholder group. And this will consist then of representatives from the South African Public University, also some directors of researchers or his representatives, as well as some members of the National Scholarly Editors Forum and of the National Scholarly Book Publishers Forum, which will then stand in an advisory committee to advise the work of this particular project. As said, I know there's a lot of changes already happening from January this particular year to now. We will have a meeting in May, an exploratory meeting, and then again in June, where we are really getting into the nitty-gritty of this project and the rollout of the different work packages. So there are 4 work packages envisaged. So the first work package then relates to the establishment then of an alert and a support system to assist universities to identify cases of questionable publishing behavior before submitting for publication subsidies. There seems to be a very big problem is where institutions actually submit the applications for accreditation through the HEMA system of the NRF, and that's where a huge amount of problems are currently being picked up, and where this predatory and unethical practices are actually highlighted and manifest itself very strongly. So there will be an early warning system, so to speak, and that consists of websites and lists, etc., and just to guide also research officers at universities about best practices and perhaps some unquestionable activities taking place at universities. The second work package then is the ongoing monitoring and evaluation of quality and integrity to the integrity of all the submissions to the DHET through rigorous and regular monitoring of all South African journals. So this is where this forum is starting to play a huge role in where we can channel the problems, etc., and aligning activities as such. So the development and monitoring of a list of accredited book publishers. This is where the National Scholarly Book Publishers will play an important role, and the monitoring of a list of accredited conference proceedings. So again, you can already see there's a tightening up of the quality of journals, book publishers, South African book publishers, as well as international book publishers, and then conference proceedings. The net is certainly closing in on these different research output policy categories to adhere to quality standards. So work package 2 really then points to us, and us I mean this particular group, the National Scholarly Editors Forum and the National Scholarly Book Publishers Forum, as we will have to play a crucial role in formulating, in shaping this particular quality aspect of research output. So what is the work that we'll have to do? We'll have to look at perhaps the code of best practice. My personal feeling is there's not much updating to do, but personally, I think we have to repackage it. I think there's some critical information in it already. We just need to see how we structure that document, that it fits into this particular work package. Also, the issue of AI, which is coming up, and as I said, there's a lot of criticism against it and opposing opinions, and of course, there's a lot for artificial intelligence in the use of editorial processes. So we have to build that also into our code of best practice. Then, as stated, the National Scholarly Book Publishers Forum, huge role to play there. Then the criteria, we will need you as editors. Your journals have been through this evaluation process. We have received a lot of criticism, especially towards the end, because things are changing and we have to consider other things. I would really like to advocate that we do not just rely on bibliometric analysis of journals, because it does mean that some very critical and crucial information of some journals not being indexed by these accredited indexes really falls short in terms of their bibliometric information, etc. But I also want to advocate for a very strong quantitative component within the evaluation of these journals. But saying that, I do realize we only have 3 years in which we have to complete again, and it's more than 322. I think Putty gave me a number of 347, I think, accredited South African published journals. So they're still growing, which is also of great concern. And we have to see what is it that we have to do there. And then, of course, we have to I think it's very important, and again, it's time, yes, that we try and finalize the statement on the issues and struggles faced by journal editors. I think it is the correct space now to actually push for that particular statement, whilst we're talking about alternative metrics, alternative evaluation methods, and then the important role in that editors will play through their journals as a vehicle for research output. Then work package 3 is really capacity building interventions around good practice in scholarly publishing. Although our name is not specifically mentioned there, I think the documentation, the criteria, the best practices that we will update and we will repackage will be very important in the training, especially of the research officers specifically, because as said in work package 1, that is where we identified actually quite a lot of problems happening, and that's in the research offices of institutions. And then work package number 4, that is the support for ongoing research and analysis of South African scholarly publishing practices. And there's envisaged that there will be some support to community of practice of South African scholars. Again, I think the National Scholarly Editors Forum and Book Publishers Forum plays an important role. And we seriously have to think about a next consensus study in this field. What will it be? And what value can we as a unit and as the organization and as a sector, as a community of practice actually contribute to the system as such? So Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to highlight where this project comes from, and just want to press upon the hearts of editors of journals that the game will be changing, and that ASSAf will assist and will be the conduit through which the communication will take place, and consultations. I think this will be very important for this group, is that you will be a very large consultation body in setting the agenda in going forward and the workflow, etc.
Right, okay. Yes, thank you very much for that extraordinarily detailed and well-structured discussion on the Publications Quality Framework project. In fact, the consultations that you mentioned have already started. They started last year when the CREST team and DHET met with vice-chancellors and I think deputy vice-chancellors and also research officers, because they're taking this matter very, very seriously indeed. And given the prior issues that we've discussed today about the 75%, 25% rule, which was designed to accredit, but were operating like house journals and cleaning up on the DHET funding, therefore siphoning off funding from other journals and allocations was a problem. The entry of predatory journals, and the predatory journals are good enough on their tactical behavior to get onto some of the qualifying DHET indexes. It takes a while to get them off, but it is quite clear that some authors and indeed some universities have dropped the ball in terms of internal monitoring of unethical behavior. And so again, authors who knowingly publish with journals that should not be on those indexes are stressing the budget available to the entire national system with regard to publication incentives. And the figures that are leaking, the figure that I was given of the leakage annually is upwards of 400 million rand. That's a lot of money coming out of a relatively small but generous budget that is going to affect universities that are playing the game. And again, it's the issue of quantity, pay the bills, rather than quality. CREST has graphs of how the DHET system has catapulted South African scholarship into the global world from 7,000 in 2010 to upwards of 22,000 articles in 2019. But at the same time, the consensus panels have been assessing quality and have become a little concerned about the decline in quality because of all the tactics that authors use to overproduce too many articles which are not sufficiently original. And I would urge every member of this forum to regularly consult the South African Journal of Science, which discusses these issues on a continuous basis. And these issues that we're discussing today are not new for us. They are discussed and debated in the South African Journal of Science. And we really do have to get a handle on this. As we know, the South African economy is seriously stressed, and the funding that is available has to be protected, it has to be ring-fenced, and it has to be used for the purposes for which it is intended. And there's sufficient concern within government that this is not occurring to a level that is acceptable to them. So yes, the consultations will continue. University administrators are going to be involved in almost designing their own rules so that they will be held responsible for actually enacting those rules and monitoring publication within universities and ensuring that their employees adhere to best practice and appropriate journal selection. So yes, thank you. This is going to take another couple of years. The question that I have for you, Susan, is the consensus panels evaluating journals, are those going to be on hold for the moment, or is SPP intending to start a new cycle shortly?
Thank you,
Over to
Kian.
you.
Yes, thank you very much. So, how would I answer? Well, we've actually come to the end of the first cycle in evaluating all the journals. But now through the publications quality framework, it is envisaged that we start again, but with the acknowledgement that, you know, we cannot continue with our old ways. We'll have to look at, you know, what are the new criteria? What is that we'll have to consider? As said, this project is only 3 years, and we need to ensure that we complete a cycle within the 3 years, or near complete the cycle in the 3 years. So we'll really have to look at a shortened way how to evaluate, also to save costs, because, you know, this is really needs a lot of money, and it was quite comprehensive because we invited panels. But I can see preliminary sort of discussions in the publications quality framework. Yes, that the panels will continue, but under a much shortened version. So we have to think very clear and very specific as to how can we make these panels work for us, considering costs, time, and efficiency, that we work fast and effective. So it will be a new cycle. That's the very
Thank you.
short answer.
And availability of reviewers.
Yes,
That's
indeed.
the big issue.
Indeed, and you raise an important question. You know, I can see, according to the publications quality framework again, and that it's according to subject. You know, so we'll do it again in subject clusters. That will mean that we will invite experts from that specific field, editors in that field, also others from outside the field, because it does give us sort of a control that it's not so in-house and so inward looking, is to have external editors from other fields. It gives us a little bit of a outward look as well, and it's sort of our check and our balance to be fair in our evaluations.
Thank you. I see 3 hands. I'll just take them in the order that I think they popped up in. So Luke Tumuka, please talk to us.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, I'm one of the chief editors from the South African Journal of Chemistry. Yeah, now the previous speaker talked about some preliminary report of the quality of the journal in their publishing. I don't think us from the South African Journal of Chemistry we have seen such a report. So it will be interesting if we can have access to that report. If it's, unless I didn't hear the speaker properly. Then the second one is the issue of predatory journals. Is it not because, I don't know, it's a difficult one. The issue is to pay the bills. Now, one of the challenges I've seen is that publication money, when it goes to universities, there are different models how it is administered. Is this not this many diverse models of how it is administered within the universities, also promoting this predatory aspect of the publishing? I don't know. I don't have a solution, but I think that's where my concern there, because we have different models how it is used within various universities, and sometimes within departments within the university. Yeah, it's a complex issue. But I think maybe it is standardized in some way so that it should be so left wide open like that. But, yeah, anyway, I stop here.
Okay, thank you, Luke. Just very quickly to answer your questions, all the reports and all the journals are available on the ASSAf website. Just go to the consensus panels on journal evaluations. With regard to predatory. Yes, well, not all authors are aware that a journal is predatory. And in fact, some of our own members have been caught out and have even written about how they got caught out and how to actually identify predatory journals. There are now templates all over the world that one can check. But the point is that universities' assessment committees need to identify the legit journals from the illegitimate journals and advise their employees accordingly. And then thirdly, the different models of incentive allocation that exist within universities, that's a university matter. I don't think that DHET wants to impose a single one-size-fits-all model on all institutions. Different institutions have different needs, different ways of allocating in terms of their specific policies. The question is, are the incentives being distributed in a ethical manner? And one of the points that has come up continuously in the NSEF meetings is the unethical behavior of universities which do allow fully employed establishment researchers to take home a percentage or all of the incentive money as taxable income. That incentive is intended to build this institutional capacity, not to increase the salary of the individual researcher. And that's a question that I think that the PQF is going to consider in some depth. Okay. Do you want to
Yes, I
qualify
actually
those?
want to hop in here. So, Luke, I agree. You've raised a very sensitive matter, and that is the one of the distribution of the funding. You know, after the institution has received it from then the DHET. So what the publication quality framework did last year is that they have sent a questionnaire to all the research officers inquiring exactly what happens to that money once it's received into the bank accounts of the different universities. So certainly we have a very good idea already as to who does what with it. But now the question remains, and I think that will be very interesting. What are the PQF going to do about that? You know, will they narrow down and say you're not allowed to do A, B, and C? Or will they leave the status quo? This is a very personal opinion. I get the idea that they might actually set some very broad guidelines to institutions as to how it might be used and how it not should be used. So that's a quick answer. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Watch this space. Okay, Ferdinand Fester, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to Susanna said.
We're having difficulty hearing you. Your voice is breaking up.
Okay, let's try this again. Jay, Susanna said,
there's lots of dropout. We can't actually follow you. Could you write your question into the chat line or the Q&A, please?
Can I try one more time?
Sure.
Okay.
Susanna said a lot. And
no, you're more silent than speaking. I'm afraid we can't follow you. Please just do write your comment or question in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll follow it up from there. Okay, I'm going to go to Ivy Gledhill in the meantime, and we'll come back to you, Ferdinand, when we've got your written document.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add a note of encouragement for continuing to find funding for this activity in a time of constrained resources, which I think is the official term for not having very much money, and keeping negotiating for funding. This debate is one that is extremely important for the relevance of ASSAf and the relevance of SPP and the impact on authors and editors, because ASSAf is the voice of scholars who are most active in our society and of scholarly achievement, together with SBP, NSBP, ASSAf, NSEF, and associated things. I would like to say we should keep going looking for funding, because imagine if these groupings were not involved in this debate. Our relevance would be very much diminished, and we are representatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Igla. Excuse me. I don't see, Ferdinand, are you typing up your question? Okay, I see that there are 2 points. Am I correct, Susan, still on the agenda, the code of conduct? And then the ASSAf
Yes.
open science policy. Would you like to move on to those while we wait for further questions?
Yes, sure. Because I see there are other 2 questions. So let me carry on with the agenda, and then we can take all the questions at the end. So the next one is then the code of conduct for research. So this is the it's a code of conduct that we started. It's almost 2.5, almost 3 years ago. It was in response of the POPIA Act, and it pertains then to the protection of personal information of research incumbents, especially when sharing data. The POPIA Act allows us to draft a code, and it's for specific groups, and then to get it accredited and endorsed by the information regulator. So we have been twice back to the information regulator, and the last word was that our code has not been approved by the information regulator. So we were quite disappointed, but I think in hindsight, it has actually opened up some other possibilities for us just to broaden, well, not to broaden the code, but to put additional things in, because we find that researchers actually battle, and that NHREC's research ethics committees actually are looking for guidance and guidelines in how they can deal with this matter of the protection of personal information when sharing data. And why we chose also to embark on this particular journey is because it is about sharing data. So it makes data more open. But what we also find in Africa, of course, is that that international companies would come in, they would do the research, and once they depart from that particular country, they take all the data with. So this is also an effort of us to raise awareness, not only nationally, where we do participate in very big health collaborations, very large collaborations, but Africa also collaborate in very large health collaborations, and we need to create awareness and caution them about and to protect their data, and specifically personal information that's coupled or non-coupled then with the data as such. But what we've decided now is actually to come up with a framework, which is like almost a code of best practice for researchers when conducting research and personal information attached then to data. We will embark now on huge stakeholder consultations again. I think the sector was a bit shocked that we took and that we went into another direction. Quite a lot of concern. We've had a number of meetings already with some stakeholder groups asking for clarification, etc. But we envisage that this new framework will then be completed in the next 2 months. So the sector again is looking forward that we do have such a framework in place. We hope that we can still get a meeting with the information regulator, but they're quite tight. The information regulator does not really want to enter into discussions, but we've got a very good relationship with them. We will certainly try our luck there, so to speak. There were 2 grounds on which the information regulator did not approve our code, and the one is that the Act says that the code is for specific groups, meaning the members of ASSAf, and that's not what we want. We don't want it only for the members of ASSAf. We want it for the complete research fraternity to benefit through this code. So that was one huge glaring sort of concern against our code, and the second one is how would we govern it. So we thought that we had the governance thereof very well in place, but I must admit that our council on many occasions actually also expressed their concern about the governance of this code. But now, because we have a framework, the governance will look completely different in how we apply and how we enforce, if I can use that very strong word, this framework. So it did solve two very big problems actually, but it will mean that we will just have to get the buy-in again from the stakeholder group. I think especially my program, it has been one of the largest and the biggest stakeholder consultation strategy that we had. But we will certainly just follow in the footsteps of that strategy. It really paid off, and it gave us quite a lot of kudos and some recognition in the field. Right, I will now move on then to the ASSAf Open Science Policy. ASSAf decided to construct this policy. We have been busy with open access and later on evolved to open science. Over the last 15 years, we have no official document within ASSAf where we recognize the work that we do, and you know, all our work that we do is open access, open data, and it's now have evolved to open science. And we just decided to have this policy in place to at least indicate to the rest of the world how we align our work that we do with major policies, like the framework of the DSI, UNESCO Open Science Recommendations, the ISC of the Future of Scholarly Publishing. There are many, even the G20 starting to producing some documentation in terms of open science. So we just thought it's appropriate. So it's about ASSAf activities. It is not a policy that directs the open science activities of institutions and organizations outside of ASSAf. So I hope that distinguishing comment then shows you what is the difference. We also see that the DSI have set major frameworks, policies in place. For instance, ASSAf did a transformation strategy, but that is really very important for the rest of organizations also to see what is our intention. The second one we did was the science engagement strategy, which also ties into their science engagement strategy. And then the ASSAf Open Science Policy, of course, eventually when the Open Science Framework / policy is approved by Parliament, then we already have something in place that ties up very nicely with that. So I think strategically it was also good to construct these policies. Thank you, Chair. That brings me to the end of my long-winded feedback, and I hope it has been valuable and worthwhile to our participants on this call.
Thank you, Susan. I think that these background details which govern what we do are absolutely important. We need to know about them, and you've covered them exceptionally well. I do see suddenly a new hand up. Kelly Molt, would you like to speak to us?
Thank you. Hi, Susan. That was really useful and interesting. I wondered, is it possible to get like a bullet point kind of summary or just something to make sure that we can follow, all of what you just said? And is it possible to have a body break sometime soon?
Yes. In fact, I was going to suggest that we do that right now, because I think that Susan needs time to recover for the next session. She's done a magnificent job thus far. Susan, did you want to quickly respond, and then we'll have a slightly extended tea break?
Yes, absolutely. Just want to say, Kelly, thank you for that question. I don't see that it has actually been addressed in the chat box, and that is that we have an excellent minute taker also online, and we will take extensive minutes. And of course, as appendices, we will include all the different documents that have been sent to you, that you can have one set of of all the facts and agenda items and the decisions, etc., in one central place. I just see there's one anonymous participant that says, please place a URL for details of the PQF in the chat. I'm not sure in Crest whether it's publicly placed on their particular website, but what we certainly do is just to make sure is we can resend the PQF documentation which we have received as part of the project or being involved in the project, etc. But we'll just check, but certainly you can have the details thereof. Thank you. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you. Let's then take a break and reconvene at 11:15 to get back into concert with the scheduled agenda.